Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 14. Today my guest is Julia Bausenhardt. Julia is an illustrator and nature enthusiast who teaches art techniques through connection with nature. She uses her sketchbook as a tool for exploration, experimentation, and discovery. Julia was actually one of the first teachers I came across years ago when I was first learning about nature journaling. It was for this reason that I was very happy and excited to chat with her. Julia, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Bethan. I'm really excited too, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
I don't know if you know this, but I have been a fan of yours for a lot of years, and I found you online, I can't remember how many years ago, but there was one time when on Instagram you commented on one of my illustrations, and I was really like a fan, and I was saying, oh, Julia, talk to me.
Oh, that's so exciting. I didn't know that. This is really great.
Isn't that funny? So I feel, it wasn't, we haven't connected until early this year when I reached out to you about doing a blog post for International Nature Journaling Week. And I was the same then, like a little bit silly and fanish for you. And I was like, oh, I'm not sure if she'll write back to me. And then you wrote back and I was really excited.
Which is really funny because I'm really not the kind of person that is, not available to talk with people. Or I feel the same about a lot of artists that I like and that I follow, and I'm always this shy person. Well, maybe they don't have time for me.
But you did have time for me, and you had a lot of time for International Nature Journaling Week, and you wrote a beautiful blog post, and you were one of the featured artists, and you gave us a tutorial about quick sketching skies to break the anxiety of the first page of a nature journal, which is an amazing gift because that's a big issue for a lot of people.
Yes, it also was a big issue for me at a time. I remember when I got back into sketching more regularly, I didn't feel good about sketchbooks, and I was doing a lot of design and one-off illustration works at that time, so client work, and I always did these on loose sheets of paper because I didn't want to put anything in a sketchbook. I thought, well, the client work has to look great, it has to be perfect, and my sketches have to be perfect too, which is obviously not true. And I should have known that because I went through art school. I knew how to to use a sketchbook as a tool, but somehow I was so eager to deliver a good product, a good end product, that I was deadly afraid of my sketchbook. And so it was a really big thing for me to discover that you can have fun with your sketchbook and you can really use it as a tool for exploration and for trying out things that you don't have to show to anyone if you don't want to.
Yes, and this comes across in your work very strongly, that your sketchbook is a place of joy, a place for experimentation and a place for discovery, and that's a beautiful gift that you're giving the world.
Yes, and I try to tell that to everyone. So even if, I don't share every page that I draw, and I tell the people who comment on this, well, this looks great and I want to sketch something like this, but it never turns out that well. I tell that to people, well, I only show you the best pages. Maybe I should share my bad pages, because that's what it's all about when you're trying to just see sketching and journaling as a sort of journey and a sort of everyday activity that you can learn through.
Yes. And speaking about journeys, I'm really interested to talk about your early nature experiences. I find that people who love nature as adults often have
nature experiences in their early life. Can you tell me a little bit about your early nature experiences?
Well, I think I grew up in a small town and surrounded by nature, in sort of this small mountain town. And so nature sort of has always surrounded me in a way. My parents often took me out for foraging for berries or mushrooms and stuff like that. And I learned a lot from them through that about the local species, local plants, and I always kept asking questions. And so these are sort of my earliest memories, spending time outside with my family and just being surrounded by all of these great things. And we also had a lot of these reference books in our house. And my parents had books that were not recent books with photography, but books with illustrated pictures of these sort of plants and animals. And I really like looking at them. And sometimes my mother encouraged me to draw from them and to copy these. And this was a really fun activity for me, and maybe a precursor for my later activities and career.
Was she an artist as well, or did she just encourage it in you?
Yes, she actually was an artist too, or she is an artist too. So she also went to art school, and she ended up a little bit differently. So she and my father ended up doing a lot of travel, and my father is a travel journalist, and so she worked on him for the books and drew maps of the places that they went to.
Wow, so it's definitely in your blood.
Yes, probably.
And so you mentioned you went to art school, and I'm wondering about, did nature journaling, as you know it today, come before or after art school? How did you get into nature journaling?
It definitely came after art school. So when I went to art school, we had something similar that most of the teachers who taught the basic drawing or painting classes said it's really important for you to keep a sketchbook. It's a great tool for exploring and for finding out your artistic style and try out things, and all of the things that I said earlier that are important, why it's good to have a sketchbook. Yes. And so I had this habit of always taking a small notebook or a small sketchbook with me and just jotting down what I was thinking or making these little sketches. And we also had a lot of these classes where you would be drawing, and we were just a group and be drawing an entire day at the zoo or at the botanical garden. And so this was a bit similar to nature journaling, but it didn't have the aspect of finding out things and exploring so much. It was just this visual thing of how does this work? How do these shapes fit together? And so it was making sense of it in a visual way.
Just the art focus.
Yes.
And then how did you move into keeping notes and exploring observations and all that stuff in your nature journal?
I think it was after a few years after art school, I was doing, as I said, I was doing a lot of design work, a lot of client work, and I felt it felt a bit like a dead end for me. Sometimes it was really challenging, and sometimes there were nice jobs, but I didn't feel interested in every one of them. And you don't have to, that's fine. But for me, I was searching for a way to connect with my art again. And I remember reading books at the time by Bernd Heinrich, who is a naturalist, I believe a biologist in the US. And I think he has German heritage, but he has taught as a professor in the US for a very long time. And I remember reading his books, and he has sort of these detective stories about natural topics. So he explores ravens in his forest, or the trees in his forest, or he followed around different animals in winter to figure out what they were doing. And of course, he's a biologist, so he knows what he's doing, and he does all this scientific stuff, which to me, I don't have a scientific background, but I enjoyed reading about these steps. And then I saw he had these little sketches, these little drawings accompanying his notes, his field notes. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I do something like this? I mean, I like nature and I like being outside. And why don't I do more sketching when I'm outside? And it was at the same time that I had this sudden interest in learning more about birds, which is really strange because I never had a particular love for birds before. And I always thought they were such weird creatures, but somehow I thought maybe I should learn how to draw birds. And then I started this and kept this little sketchbook with my really bad sketches and anatomical studies of birds for a while. And somehow I figured out through the internet that what I was doing was sort of nature journaling, and it's this thing that people do, and that
it's got a name.
Yes, it's got a name, and you can do so many things with this. And this was such a revelation. So it instantly clicked with me that this is what I was doing to bring my art back to a state where I really liked what I was doing.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting you mentioned birds, because I was going to bring it up with you, because birds are a big motif in your art and your classes, and also butterflies. And I'm interested in what you've explained the bird part. I'm interested in the butterflies. What draws you to these motifs?
I will go back to the birds for one more story that I can tell you, because I remember very well when before I went to art school, I was volunteering for an NGO here, for a nature NGO, one of the biggest that we have here, and we always did these birding tours for people. So we offered this, and my job was to help organize these tours. So making sure the people arrived where they should arrive, and making sure everyone was comfortable and stuff like this. And then I learned, obviously I had to learn all of the birds' names, and I knew what a goose looked like when it's flying over us, and I knew I knew every goose that was out there. I knew all the swans. Then we were offering these tours when it was migration time, so in winter, and a lot of geese and swans. And then when these tours had started, then I would just stand there and wait, and all of the people had their binoculars out and their big, expensive cameras. And I used to think, well, what are these people doing here? I mean, it's birds. I just couldn't get it. I wasn't really, I knew all the facts, and I just wasn't that fascinated by them. And in hindsight, I can totally understand it, because that's what my partner and I do now. We get out our binoculars and think, oh, that's so great. That's a Canada goose. Or that's a kingfisher. And oh, look what he's doing. So,
and do you know what made the switch? Do you know what was the turning point when you got it?
I don't know. Maybe it was reading more in books about people who were fascinated by birds. I mean, sometimes it's just this. You have to get to know something before you start liking it, and maybe was just that.
So interesting. And I've heard a similar story a couple of times before on the podcast, where people have said like, oh, birds, I wasn't really interested, and then something happened, and then they just completely fell in love with birds and birding. And one of my guests was saying that she was out and she experienced the dawn chorus, and it was this dawn chorus that changed her into a birder. And even John Muirlaws talked about he wasn't very interested, but he was taking his father out bird watching for his health, and then there was one experience with the bird where they really connected, and he got it. He fell into birding in this big way, and it sounds like you did the same thing.
It is so fascinating. I mean, these little weird creatures, these little dinosaurs, and somehow they're just fascinating.
And it's beautiful because they're everywhere. You know, even in the middle of London, or in the middle of Paris or Berlin or whatever, you can you can find birds.
Yes,
and
you can watch birds everywhere, and if you sit very still, they come close to you and they do their thing. And yeah, I think you can get a lot out of birding, definitely, and of sketching birds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great story. I love that.
Yes, and about the butterflies, I'm not sure. I mean, they're just beautiful. I think they're a lot easier as a subject than maybe birds for a lot of people, because they're just these really beautiful creatures, and they're also very accessible. And yes, I remember looking through these illustrated reference books with butterflies and just leafing through them and thinking, oh, if I could ever see this one and this one. And now, of course, they're becoming less and less common here now. Because
That's interesting.
Yes, we had a big decline in insects in recent years here in Germany, and I think all over Europe. I'm not sure, but at least in Germany, the mass of insects has declined really, really. It's really quite tragic. So
Is it because of land use change or pesticide use? Or
yes, I think it has to do with land use, with pesticides. Also, it's also a part of climate. So many species aren't adapted to the climate changes that come. But I think the biggest part of it is really pesticides.
I was reading a book, I was listening to an audiobook actually, and I can't remember the author, but the book is called The Moth Snowstorm. And this is a reference to in years past that the author remembers. And I actually remember it too after he said it, that when you used to be driving at night, you would just see like your headlights were just shimmering because there was insects everywhere slapping against the car.
Insects
and now,
on the windshield and everything.
on the windshield, yeah. But now you don't see that, and it's because of these reasons that you mentioned, and it's a sad thing. But it was interesting that he said that, because I hadn't really noticed that change. But now he says it, I realize,
Yes, yes, that's the same for me too. I realized that after I heard some people talking about this over and over again. So we have to do something about this. We have to do something. And over years and over years. And now everyone sort of has started talking about it, and the media has picked it up. But it's a question of how can we change the systems that we have established. And
we have right at this moment in Brisbane experienced a butterfly migration, and so there's just butterflies everywhere, which is actually a real joy. It's just to see butterflies just dotting the air all day. It's really, really special.
Sounds really great. That's so cool.
I'm wondering, I guess there is, but I'm wondering if you've come across like groups like, you know, there's birder groups and they tick off all the birds that they have on a list. I'm wondering if there's groups of lepidopterists that tick off all the butterflies in the same way.
Well, probably. I mean, I have been to these meetings these hobby lepidopterists, or maybe even hobby naturalists, who go out with their cameras and then they go birding or butterfly watching, or many of them are focused on plants, because I suppose because they're easy subjects.
Yes.
And it's always really nice to chat with them. And when I start taking out my sketchbook, they're all really, oh, why don't you just take photos? It's so much easier. So it's always a real challenge to tell them, well, try drawing stuff. It's really cool too.
It's different. Yeah.
Yes.
Have you managed to convince anyone in the group?
No, not really up until now, but I keep trying.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, so you live in Germany, and I'm interested to know what nature is like in your patch. What does it look like when you step outside?
So I live in the middle of Germany, in a city called Kassel, and it's not really a big city, so it's rather small, and we have a lot of rural areas outside surrounding us. And so there are a lot of forests with a mix of deciduous and evergreen trees. And a lot of fields and then these small towns tucked in between. And so it's really a lot of variety. And the one interesting thing is that this area that I live in is the area where the Brothers Grimm in the 19th century, they collected the tales for their fairy tale collection here. So these are the landscapes where supposedly these fairy tales happened.
Yeah, where Hansel and Gretel ran through the woods.
Yes, exactly. Or where the people lived who told these tales to their children. And so every time I see the landscapes here, I think, well, maybe some interesting or mysterious or some story happened here. And so it has really a lot of history. And I don't know, it sort of sometimes I think it becomes apparent because they are really very variable landscapes. So sometimes you have these dark, deep valleys with these little mountain streams going through. And then again, you have these sort of airy, big forests that are like church halls. And so it's all very close together and very enjoyable to walk through.
Oh, that sounds really, really magical. Wow. So I'm interested to talk about field sketching versus studio sketching, because I get from your work the idea that you prefer to do most of your work in the field. Would you say that was true?
Well, I at least try to do this. And it's also the aspect that I really love about nature journaling, because it's such an immediate thing. You go out, you have all of your senses are focused on this nature experience, and you can look at the light, at the colors, you can turn this object in your hands, and it's really different than just sketching from a photo, which is also okay if you don't have any other reference. And I often have to do this for client work and stuff like that. But I almost always try to do the initial part of my sketches when I'm outside. And I have this year I have taken up a new thing, and I've started plein air painting, which is sort of like sketching a landscape outside. And so I don't do the whole I drag my easel outside thing with oils, but I just use my sketchbook and I use my watercolors, and so I don't have to use other materials than that. But it's become apparent to me that for this type of painting or for sketching, it's really important that you are actually outside, because what you see when you're outside, the light and the colors and the values in the landscape are so different than what a camera sees and what camera can record. And I know this especially because I used to do landscape photography, so I actually majored in art school in photography, not in drawing or illustration. And so I know that what the camera can put onto film or onto the sensor has to be edited in order to look like the thing that you saw when you thought, oh, this could be a great landscape picture, this could work out. And you have to edit it really heavily in order to
just
match.
To get back to normal.
Yes, right. And so this is why it was so fascinating for me to go through this process of, well, when I do sketching outside or when I go plein air painting, then I can do this directly with a brush on the paper, and it's so much easier. It's just a different process, I think.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of descriptions and videos about your watercolor kit and the tools you use for watercolor, but I noticed that you're inching towards gouache, and you've been doing some experimentations with gouache and doing landscape paintings with gouache. I'd love to talk about that, because I think a lot of the nature journaling community just pick up watercolor and start there. And I know I haven't really experimented with gouache, so I'm interested to know your thoughts on it and how it feels and how it's different and what you're getting out of it.
Yeah, so gouache is really very similar to watercolor. In fact, it is a water-based media and it just behaves a little bit differently. And if you thin it down, then it essentially becomes watercolor. So you can do
Okay.
this layering type of stuff. It's different in the way that you can do more opaque paintings with it.
Mm-hmm.
So watercolor always stays this sort of transparent and you can do layering. And gouache is more like opaque from the start. So it has a bit of a different painting process to it. And it's very versatile. You can do you can build up your sketches a bit differently. You don't have to preserve these white areas. And although, well, with watercolor you can also go over with white pen or with white gouache if you want to have your whites. But with gouache you can practically start with a dark background and then paint the light colors over it. And I have noticed, so I did a lot of these plein air paintings that I did this summer were in gouache, and I noticed it's not all that, it's not really practical. It's a nice medium, and it's more practical than oil colors and stuff like that. But for me, it meant really changing the way that I thought about painting and changing the way that I thought about sketching a lot. And maybe it's this learning curve that yes. But
so do you think you'll go back to, do you think you'll stick with watercolor as your main medium?
I still paint a lot with watercolors. I mean, the journal entries that I do are mainly in watercolor, and I use it side by side. So I like to explore new media from time to time, and this year it was time for gouache.
I like that you're not precious about tradition, like you say. Don't worry about the traditional watercolor thing where you have to have the white. You can put a gel pen on top, you can put gouache on top, you can do what you want. It's about experimentation and fun, and I think that's something I get from your work, is just be free and experiment, and I like that.
Definitely. I think that makes it so much more accessible to people who are new at sketching or painting. And I always like to tell this story that I read somewhere, I hope that it's true, that this great American painter, this watercolor painter, Homer Winslow, he used to use white gouache for his paintings all the time because he made so many mistakes, and he cursed all the time when he was painting, and he just fixed his mistakes with white gouache. So why can't we do this?
Yeah, it's good to know that the masters do that.
Yes, exactly.
So you have a lot of amazing nature journaling courses on Skillshare and on your website as well. And I love to talk about your process and you're developing these courses, because they're really accessible. I always feel like when I'm watching one of your courses that I'm sitting beside you in the grass and looking over your shoulder and just learning from you. It's really relaxing and calming to watch one of your videos. Tell me about that, about the courses and how you got into doing that.
That's so nice to hear. That's really the thing that I'm aiming for with these courses. So I want to make this accessible for anyone, and even people who think they can't draw or they can't handle watercolor paint. And it's really more about the exploring part. And that's how I stumbled into this online teaching thing as well. I thought it would be nice to share what I know and share the steps of how you can, produce an image in the same way that I did. And I really enjoy the part about teaching because it's, I feel like when I teach these things to other people, then I learn a lot about it too. It's sort of this, when you can teach someone how to do something, you have to know how to do it yourself. I don't know if this comes across in the right way, but
no, I've had that exact same experience. And one example I remember at university, and in biology, the teacher asked me to teach another student, and the concept, I remember teaching him, and And then it just sort of went clunk, 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 clunk in my mind. I was like, oh, I get it. And he said, didn't you know it already? And I was like, I did, yes, but it just sort of got sunk in. In fact, I was teaching him about evolution and the process of evolution. And I did know it, but it wasn't until I tried to explain it to him that it really like sort of clunked down into my mind and went, oh yeah, I get it, you know? And so maybe that's what you're describing.
Yes, that's exactly the thing that I try to describe. And and it's also, it's such a nice thing to share this explorative aspect of journaling with people, and this sort of notion that you should and can experiment in the sketchbook, and it doesn't have to be perfect at the first try. And that, well, and I guess I met a lot of people who just love nature.
Yes.
I think that's the best part for me.
Yeah, there's real power in bringing art and nature together, and you do that so beautifully because you have an art background, but you're also passionate about nature, and so you're helping people love nature, but at the same time learn art, and that's beautiful.
And you know, at the beginning I thought, well, should I even do this? Because I don't have this scientific background, so I had to learn a lot of things about the things that I was teaching myself. I had to learn about bird anatomy and about butterfly anatomy and all of that stuff. And I thought, well, someone else could probably do this better than me, someone who has studied this. But I don't know, it was almost as if through drawing and through the art that I made, I learned such a big, I learned so much through that I felt if I can do this and if I can get access to this, then it would be so cool if other people could see this too, that you don't have to have any background of any kind.
Yes.
And it can really be for everyone.
Yeah. You also teach through videos on your YouTube channel, and you have a lot of videos there, really wonderful explorations of your palette and your process. And I'm interested to know about the medium of video. So a lot of people do blogs, and you do blogs too, but it seems that video really works for you in sharing your knowledge with the community. And I'm wondering if you could talk about like the medium of video. How does that feel for you, and what's pulling you towards video as a teaching medium?
Well, I think for art demonstrations and for painting, it makes really a lot of sense to have this immediate this image, this video. You can see what I'm doing if you watch the video. And I also learned a lot from watching videos by other artists. So I think it's the next best thing to watching someone paint standing right beside you. And so this is what drew me to it in part. And I think it's just a very good tool for teaching others. And I still love blogging, though. I'm not sure if I would give up blogging.
Yeah.
But it's different, and it's both a good way to keep this connection or build this connection with people.
We have to, the whole, everything's changing and everything's online, so we have to find ways that we can connect with people in the best, most real way in an unreal situation, if that makes sense.
Definitely, yeah.
So you did something very brave about a year and a half ago, and you ditched your social media accounts.
Yes, I did. Except for YouTube, which some people consider social media. I have to add this. But essentially, I deleted all of my accounts.
Yeah, and this is something that I think a lot of people will be interested to hear about. And I know you've explored it on your YouTube channel and on your website, but I'd love to chat a little bit about it, if that's okay with you.
Definitely.
Because I've heard from a lot of people that they tumble down into this rabbit hole, and they get lost, and they get anxious and all that stuff, all the reasons that you quit social media are reasons why people are questioning it. And I'm wondering if you could give a little overview about, I guess people know reasons why, but how did it feel and what happened afterwards?
Well, at first it felt really weird. And before I deleted all of it, I took breaks from it. I sort of ignored my social media channels for a while, for months or for 2 months. And then I came back to it because I thought, as an artist who has to market herself, I have to be on social media and all of that stuff that you hear everywhere. Because everyone tells you that you have to be on social media, or you can't market your art and you can't sell anything and you don't get noticed and you don't get clients and all of that stuff. And I believed this. And I wasn't feeling good about social media. I wasted a lot of time. And I noticed that other artists that I followed were doing this too from time to time. They stepped away and then they came back and basically said, well, I don't really want to, and I know I will get sucked in again, but I know I have to do this because I need to do it. Yeah. And I didn't really like it. And I read a lot of books in that time and watched documentaries that were talking and that were just casting this critical voice and speaking about the psychological aspects of it and how we are changed and how our brain chemistry is basically exploited to turn us into these attention zombies. And so we are conditioned by the apps and the algorithms to stay there and waste even more time. And I didn't like it. And what sealed it for me that I would like to delete all of the platforms was I didn't want to drag other people onto the platforms because they wanted to hear from me. I thought if they want to follow me and my work, I have a blog, and that blog doesn't have a feed and it doesn't keep you on the website if you want to leave and have better things to do. And people can decide if they want to visit me, so to speak, and communicate, or if they want to do something else. And so this was really a major thing for me. And I have to say, I had really a lot of anxiety surrounding this because I thought if I delete these profiles, and I didn't even have really that many followers, but if I delete these profiles, then no one will find me. No one will come to me. I will be a failed artist. I will not have clients. I can just give up and close down shop.
And it didn't happen, right?
No, it didn't happen. People just found me through web search, and people still come to me that way, and it still works. Although I have to say, the only group that I really miss on Facebook is the nature journaling community of John Mueller's. But
that community has grown so much lately.
Yes.
It seems like COVID has brought a whole lot of people to nature journaling.
Oh,
Have you
really?
found that nature journaling just seems to be booming now? And I think
that's so interesting.
I think people are looking for connection to nature, something calming, something for them. How has COVID changed your nature journaling?
Yes, how has it changed my nature journaling? Well, it's certainly, I have to be more organized right now about going out for sketching. So I know that when we had the first lockdown, which wasn't really a lockdown, but we weren't encouraged to go out that much here in Germany, when that was here in spring, I didn't really go out anymore for sort of recreational activities. And then when we started taking walks and hikes again, I noticed that I had less time for journaling, because often when we decided to drive a little bit and then go to the countryside and go for a hiking day outside, then this happened most of the time. This happened with my partner, and he doesn't sketch or draw.
Okay.
And I just didn't make him wait. So I
It's
decided,
complicated, isn't it?
yes, it's really complicated when you go outside sketching with someone who doesn't do the same thing. And while we're both really into nature, I decided, okay, I have to adapt my process. Yeah, I can't just do an entire sketching day with him standing there. Okay, I'll read another book on my Kindle. So this doesn't really work. So I decided that I have to find a way to do these really quick sketches while I'm outdoors. And then I have to do the rest when I'm back at home. And it has worked out quite well, I think. I take a lot of photos, basically, and I always, when I can, I also have a little bit of video footage, so it feels more like it's this live action thing.
Yeah.
And I also discovered for myself that in the summer I got up really early, and I took my sketching kit, and then I just rode on my bike till I saw something green beyond the city, and then I started sketching. And so this was the time that I spent for myself sketching, just enjoying the time outside. And so, but it has definitely changed how I interact with people that I meet outside. I mean,
yes,
yeah, it's gotten a bit more difficult.
yeah. Yeah, it's a strange time, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Is nature journaling a head activity for you or a heart activity?
Well, that's a good question. I think it is both.
Yeah.
I think it's I always have this background knowledge that I can access when I start sketching. So all of these decisions. So which pen do I take? What's the composition like? And what parts do I want to put into focus? And all of these decisions that I am used to in my day-to-day work life as an illustrator. So I don't think I can turn this off. And there's also yeah, and I think there's also this part that's interested in the scientific side, because I want to learn so much about the things that I find outside, and to really sort of categorize them and learn more about all of these different mushrooms and insects and birds. And so that's always in the back of my head. But then there's also, so I think I'm always looking for the emotional connection that I have with a subject. And often it's a feeling, or often it's a feeling that draws me to a subject. And most recently with these landscapes, I kept looking for landscapes that activated this certain feeling in me, maybe this mystery, or this place that's maybe a little bit magical. And I tried to find this mode where I could sort of connect to this and tell this emotional story, this story how I feel in my sketch. And I hope this comes through a bit in the work, or this is what keeps people interested in the work, that you can tell a story with a sketch or through art.
Yeah. Yeah, art is a powerful communication tool, isn't it? And it can transfer something from your head and your heart over to another person. And that's a pretty beautiful way to live life.
Really a fascinating thing. And it always, I mean, it works across all art forms. It's in literature, it's in movies, it's in paintings, or in sketchbooks. Yeah. It's really a great communication tool.
Julia, thank you so much for talking with me, sharing your stories, and being here. Chatting with you has absolutely been a heart experience for me, so thank you.
Oh, Bethan, thank you so much for inviting me. This was such a great experience for me. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Julia. please take a look at her website, juliabausenhardt.com, which is full of wonderful nature journaling courses and information. Also follow the link to her YouTube channel where she's shared many videos on her techniques and process that will help you with your own nature journaling and art practice. During the interview, I mentioned a book, but I couldn't recall the author in that moment. The book is called The Moth Snowstorm, Nature and Joy by Michael McCarthy. I've put a link to it in the show notes for this episode. I've also put links to the Q&A videos where Julia is talking about her experience of giving up social media. Thank you for listening. See you next week.